London, 1666. The Great Fire. Smoke rises in thick black columns above the timber rooftops, blotting out the September sun and turning midday into twilight. The crackle of burning wood fills the air, punctuated by the crash of collapsing buildings and the desperate shouts of people trying to save what little they can carry. The heat is unbearable even from streets away, radiating like an open furnace that turns stone too hot to touch. We're standing in London on September 2nd, 1666, watching the greatest fire in the city's history consume everything in its path. This is the weekend that will erase medieval London forever, when a spark in a bakery on Pudding Lane becomes an inferno that devours over 13,000 houses, 87 churches, and the heart of England's capital. King Charles II has just returned from exile 5 years ago, restoring the monarchy after Cromwell's Commonwealth, and now he watches helplessly as his capital burns. London in 1666 is a crowded medieval labyrinth of roughly 80,000 buildings packed inside and just beyond the old Roman walls, home to perhaps 500,000 souls living in conditions that make fire almost inevitable. The city sprawls along the Thames, its wealth built on trade with the world, but its streets remain narrow, dark, and dangerous. Most buildings are timber-framed with thatched roofs or wooden shingles, leaning so close to each other across the streets that neighbors can shake hands from their upper windows. The summer of 1666 has been brutally dry, leaving the wood as parched as kindling, and a strong east wind has been blowing for days. This moment matters because London stands at a breaking point. The plague killed nearly 100,000 people just last year, leaving the city traumatized and economically devastated. The fire that begins this September morning will finish what the plague started, clearing away the medieval city and forcing a complete reinvention of urban life. What seems like pure catastrophe will become, in a twisted way, London's chance to rebuild itself for the modern age. Our journey takes us to where it all began, in the cramped streets around Pudding Lane near London Bridge. Thomas Farriner's bakery stands here, a typical timber structure with the shop on the ground floor, the family's living quarters above, and the ovens in the back. Shortly after midnight on September 2nd, a spark from one of those ovens ignites something, perhaps a pile of wood or some straw, and within minutes the entire building is ablaze. Farriner and his family escape by climbing through an upstairs window and across the roofs. But their maid, too frightened to follow, becomes the fire's first victim. The flames spread quickly through the neighborhood, jumping from roof to roof with terrifying speed. By dawn, 300 houses are burning, and the fire has reached the riverfront, where the warehouses hold barrels of oil, tallow, spirits, and other combustibles that explode like bombs when the heat reaches them. The Thames itself seems to burn as flaming debris falls into boats moored along the shore. People flee in panic, pushing carts loaded with their possessions toward the river or out through the city gates. The streets around Pudding Lane are so narrow that fire hooks and water buckets prove useless. The standard practice of creating fire breaks by pulling down buildings comes too late, hampered by property owners who refuse to let their homes be demolished, and by officials too slow to act decisively. Moving west, we follow the fire's path toward the heart of London's commercial district. The Royal Exchange, the magnificent center of international trade built in 1571, stands in Cornhill surrounded by the warehouses and shops of the wealthiest merchants. This is where traders from across Europe meet to buy and sell everything from Baltic timber to Caribbean sugar, where fortunes are made and lost, where London proves itself a commercial rival to Amsterdam. But timber and thatch make no distinction between poor and rich. By Monday evening, the fire reaches the Exchange, and despite desperate efforts to save it, the building burns through the night. The courtyard where merchants gathered becomes an inferno. The galleries collapse inward, and the statue of Sir Thomas Gresham melts in the heat. Nearby, Cheapside, the great market street that has served London since Roman times, disappears into the flames. The goldsmiths' shops, the drapers' stalls, the endless commerce that made this street famous across Europe, all reduced to ash and twisted metal. People who lived their entire lives on these streets wander in shock, unable to recognize landmarks that define their world. The smell here is overwhelming, a mixture of burning wood, melted metal, scorched cloth, and something worse, the indefinable stench of a city dying. The fire now turns its fury toward the spiritual heart of London. Old St. Paul's Cathedral, one of the largest churches in Christendom, dominates the city skyline with its massive Gothic spire reaching over 500 feet into the air. The building is already in disrepair, its spire lost to lightning decades ago, its stonework crumbling, but it remains a symbol of London's ancient power and continuity. Booksellers use the cathedral's crypts and yard to store their inventory, thousands of volumes stacked in what they believe is the safest place in London. On Tuesday, September 4th, the fire reaches St. Paul's. The lead roof melts and pours down like rivers of liquid metal. The wooden scaffolding erected for ongoing repairs becomes a ladder for the flames, and the stonework itself cracks and explodes from the heat. The bookseller's inventory fuels the blaze, turning the cathedral into a furnace that burns for days. Witnesses describe the scene as apocalyptic. The great church consumed by fire so intense that stones the size of carriages are thrown through the air like pebbles. The roof collapse sounds like thunder, heard across the entire city. When the fire finally moves on, St. Paul's is a roofless ruin, its interior gutted, its history as a medieval cathedral ended forever. Our final stop takes us to the desperate efforts to stop the fire's advance. By Tuesday, King Charles himself joins the fight, working alongside his brother James, Duke of York, to organize firefighting efforts and encourage the exhausted citizens. They establish command posts at different points around the fire, coordinate the use of fire hooks and water engines, and most crucially, order the creation of effective fire breaks by using gunpowder to demolish entire rows of buildings before the flames can reach them. At the Tower of London, the garrison works frantically to protect the ammunition stores and the Royal Mint, pulling down houses all around the fortress to create a barrier of empty space. Near the Temple and Fleet Street, similar efforts finally begin to show results. The wind, London's enemy for 3 days, finally shifts and weakens on Wednesday. Combined with the fire breaks and the exhaustion of available fuel, the fire begins to lose its momentum. By Thursday morning, September 6th, the Great Fire is finally under control, though smaller fires continue to burn in the ruins for weeks. The human cost is remarkably low, with official records listing only 6 deaths, though the true number is certainly higher, with the poor and homeless unlikely to be counted. The physical destruction is staggering. Over 13,000 houses destroyed, 87 parish churches gone, the cathedral in ruins, and approximately 80% of the city within the walls reduced to smoking rubble. If you stand on Pudding Lane today, you'll find a monument marking where Farriner's Bakery once stood, though the street itself has been rebuilt so many times that nothing remains of its 1666 layout. The monument, a towering column designed by Wren and completed in 1677, stands nearby as London's permanent memorial to the fire. Climb its 211 steps, and you can see the entire city spread below. A modern metropolis of glass and steel built on the ashes of that September inferno. St. Paul's Cathedral still dominates the skyline, but it's Wren's Baroque masterpiece, not the Gothic ruin that burned. The current cathedral, completed in 1711, sits on the exact footprint of the old one, its massive dome a symbol of London's resurrection. The Royal Exchange has been rebuilt twice more since the fire, and the current building, though still called by that name, serves as a luxury shopping arcade rather than a trading floor. Walk through the square mile that burned, and you'll find almost nothing from before 1666. The street pattern shifted, widened in places by new regulations that tried to prevent such catastrophes from recurring. The timber and thatch gave way to brick and slate, The overhanging upper stories were banned, and building codes were written and enforced for the first time. London Bridge, which miraculously survived the fire, though buildings on its northern approach burned, has been replaced entirely, rebuilt in the 19th century, and then again in the 20th. The Thames waterfront, where warehouses exploded, is now lined with office towers and tourist attractions. The working river transformed into a scenic backdrop for a financial district, yet the fire's ghost lingers in the city's DNA. The parish boundaries established in medieval times and confirmed after the rebuilding still define neighborhoods. Churches rebuilt by Wren after the fire still serve congregations, their Baroque spires marking the skyline between modern towers. This journey through London's greatest catastrophe reveals a city that lost everything and gained a future. The Great Fire destroyed the medieval past so completely that rebuilding became reinvention. What rose from those ashes was a modern capital, regulated and planned, built with materials that wouldn't burn so easily, and streets wide enough to stop fires from spreading. The tragedy that began in a bakery ended an era, cleared away a city that had outgrown its medieval constraints, and created the template for the London that would dominate the next 3 centuries. The fire teaches us that cities are not eternal, that disasters can catalyze transformation, and that what seems like an ending can become a beginning. Now it's your turn to choose where we travel next. Drop a comment below telling us which city and year you'd like to explore, and we'll bring another moment in history back to life.